Welcome to Sanguine Arts Locavart, the podcast that features interviews with local Twin Cities artists. This activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. I'm your host, interdisciplinary performance artist Mary Prescott. Today we are speaking with Eyenga Bokamba. Eyenga Bokamba is an artist who trained as a writer, identifies as a visual artist, and aspires to be a sculptor. She is committed to a rigorous exploration of multimedia abstract painting, in which she creates large-scale immersive paintings and installations for purposes of the reconsideration of possibility in all realms. Eyenga is fascinated by the dimensionality and sculptural quality of translucence, how it causes a rupture in space and demands consideration. She positions her work within the context of other contemporary artists whose practices live at the intersection of a desire for social transformation and a commitment to beauty. Her greatest desire is to create work that pivots on an axis of understanding and advances our collective consciousness about what it means to be alive, thriving, and empathetic in today's world. Eyenga has shown her work in the Venice Biennale, at Frieze Los Angeles, and others, and is a recipient of a Bush Leadership Fellowship. Welcome, Eyenga. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about this.
Me too.
Yeah. I wanted to start first with a work that or a show that you were part of last year at the U of M called Layers of Joy. Can you tell me more about that event?
Yes, Layers of Joy was a beautiful show. I was so honored to be a part of it. 5 local artists were chosen to essentially be a part of a show that was a collab, kind of a communication between the notion of joy, particularly after a big collective trauma that we experienced in Minneapolis after the Minneapolis uprising in 2020, and as a result of the murder of George Floyd. And the show itself was actually constructed in conversation with the Memorialize the Movement show that was up at the same time, that showed basically many of the incredible works of art that were the outpouring of collective anguish, again, from the streets of Minneapolis, from all over the Twin Cities. And that show is really quite large, quite moving, and really centered on the examination of police violence, collective anguish, really exploring the notion of the city as a site of emotional trauma and emotional healing. And so the Layers of Joy show was really constructed by a group of really forward-thinking professors and their students to be in conversation with that show, and to be a little bit of an opportunity to exhale from that show, if you will. And so 5 of us were a part of that show, again, looking at the idea of living, right, as a person of color, as an African-American identified citizen of Minneapolis, who's alive and creating work that pivots on the axis of resilience and strength and joy. So it really was an assets-based show, and I was deeply honored to be a part of it.
That's beautiful. What did you make for the event, and how did you decide that that was what you were going to create?
So the curators chose the works and were very selective, wanting to illuminate illumination. So they actually chose to feature my silk sculptures that I had previously shown in the Venice Biennale, and that I had reconstructed for the MacPhail Center for Music for a show called Translucent Beauty, which was with the MacPhail faculty in 2023. So the curators were very curious, very insistent, and very interested in creating an environment for those sculptures to live on their own. And I was placed sort of at the end of the show, physically in the gallery space, in a wing where the curators actually put blackout panels to create an immersive environment for the lit sculptures. and I gave them permission to group them the way they would like and to light them the way they would like. And so they chose a spectrum of colors and and groupings of four, and it was just really, really dynamic. So
Mm.
that work was there at the end of the show, and at the beginning of the show, the curators chose a piece called "I See, I Feel, Somehow I Know," which is a very, very significant body of work for me. It's a series of 5 paintings. They chose the sort of largest painting of that series, painting number one. "I See, I Feel,
Mhm.
Somehow I Know," created in 2012, as I said, and that opens the show. So as you round the corner into the gorgeously lit gallery, you are seeing that painting with the words "layers of joy," the didactic kind of on the surface as you kind of round
Cool.
the glass wall. So it was a really felt like just deeply. I felt thrice honored as a U of I alum, as an educator, as an artist,
Mm.
to be featured in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Who else was involved, and what was the conversation like between the different artworks that were represented?
Yes. So Leslie Barlow is involved, and her works focused on these beautiful moments of connection between friends, uh, like this idea of like, really living while Black, right? So in one of the paintings, perhaps one of my favorites, you have a set of friends who are in a taxi in Denver, um, on vacation together, um, talking, laughing. One is holding a cell phone, and they're just in a moment of daily life made all the more poignant with the joy infused in that particular painting. Um, and especially as contrasted with, again, this idea of what was transpiring in the adjacent show, uh,
Mhm.
which is really this critique of, this our society at this moment, right? Our racialized
Mhm.
society. So
Mhm.
that was one piece that really was just super amazing to me. Alexander Beaumont had several pieces in the show, and her work also is pivoting around these like notions of friendship rendered completely differently. Hers are these really opaque compositions of multiple layers of fabric hanging from the ceiling, illustrating uh, the sort of multidimensionality of friendship with bodies rendered in thread, composed from photographs from parties that the artist created in order to get the photograph, in order to create the artwork.
Mhm.
And again, just a snapshot in time, a moment of beauty.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'll stop there. But the show, it was just gorgeous. It was absolutely, absolutely gorgeous. Yeah,
Yeah, sounds like it was wonderful and a great antidote to a lot of the trauma that was being focused on, you know.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um, and you mentioned this already, but I wanted to ask you about the McPhail project that you did called Translucent Beauty. Um, and with this project, you were in collaboration with musicians from McPhail. Can you talk a little bit about that project?
I'd love to talk about the McPhail project. It was such an honor. It was the uh, beautiful culmination of a lot of work from McPhail faculty. And they have these regular showcases called the Spotlight Series. So I was chosen along with two other local artists to anchor a year of Spotlight events. Mine happened to take place in the winter in February 2023. And for that show, what I wanted to do is have the silk sculptures in conversation with musicians. And so once I knew the bodies of work that were being covered and the mood and the instruments, and we did several run throughs, I then was on stage with the musicians, really in the background. I was some people compared it to puppeteering. Like they
Hmm.
could see the sparkle of my earrings, but they couldn't see my hands or my body. I was wearing velvet intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so as the musical numbers were unfolding, I was basically creating different configurations of the sculptures in response to what I was feeling from the music. So it was very, very, very much grounded in improvisation
Mm.
and very physically challenging. I would say I didn't anticipate. I would say I guess I didn't anticipate being so moved in both aspects of the word, moved emotionally, and then there just was a lot of movement as I was manipulating my work to respond to what I was hearing and experiencing. And then, of course,
Mm.
the audience was a part of that as well, as they are having their own experience, collective and individual and collective experience of the music and the colors and the movement and the sculpture.
Was the audience able to walk around the sculptures?
Yes, in the sense of after the show.
Mm.
And so, you know, had we had more opportunity to, um, let's say, have the show up for multiple days, because it was in Antonello Hall, and the hall is so well loved and so used that we did this just for one night. But the idea really was for them to view as opposed to interact. But afterwards, we were able to have that interaction, which was really quite beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, so lovely. Um, in your work, you deal with the concept of translucence and how it is both demanding and disruptive.
Yes.
Can you share more about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, you know, this notion of creating while black is so fascinating, to be an abstract identified artist, right, in such a racially challenged, um racially uh compartmentalized world. And so I find myself wanting to create pieces that really speak to and elevate my own sense of safety and my own sense of beauty. And an example I'll give is a project that I did as part of the rural residency for contemporary arts in Lombardy in Italy. I created a dress made out of basically four paintings, but printed on silk, which again is the same process to create the silk sculptures. And I called this dress mariposa, like the butterfly, like all about transformation and beauty. And the dress itself could fold down into my hands, and it could transform what was essentially an outfit that you wear while sleeping on an airplane to a fancy ball gown just by slipping it over your head.
Hmm.
And how does that all relate to racialized identity? You know, it's really, it I wish it weren't true, but it's really, I find it very challenging to travel while black, um, in the sense of constantly having to feel like I'm on guard for my own safety, or being judged, or um, being looked down upon, or being questioned unnecessarily because I'm seen as being posing a threat, even though I am a humanitarian and a philanthropist and an artist and an educator. No threat here.
Yeah.
But that has to be mitigated by, unfortunately, for a lot of us, making sure that we are really, 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 really overdressed while traveling. Um, and so, you know, I also end up spending a lot of money, you know, trying to fly first class or what have you, because I just get treated better when I fly first class, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it shouldn't have to be
Also,
that
it's
way.
nicer.
It's also nicer, and you have real silverware. So let's not pretend that you don't have real silverware. You do. You
And
have real
glasses.
silverware. You do. It's true.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take us off track.
No,
Go on
that's
then.
it. That's the whole point. No, my Mariposa dress helps me fly first class. Um, Sort of fly first class psychologically, right? So it's like, how do you use that translucence and
Yeah.
that opaqueness and um, that sense of fluidity that fabric, working on fabric, represents, to be able to
Mhm.
address some of those conundrums, right? And so that's sort
Mhm.
of um, where I play, where I take something that is a really difficult concept and kind of turn it on its head and see where I can find the beauty in it and the resilience and the perseverance. So yeah,
Hmm. Hmm. Um, this is along the same lines. In your bio, you talk about a desire for social transformation and a commitment to beauty in your work. Very much aligned with what you just said. How do you see beauty as a means to achieve social transformation? And how do you see it as a bridge into curiosity and intellectual freedom?
yeah. I mean, tackling the first part, that bridge part, I think that when you are trafficking in beauty the way that artists do, you are able to open up the door to communication, especially into topics that are painful for people
Hmm.
to reconcile with, to wrestle with, and it becomes a doorway into curiosity that would maybe otherwise not be exhibited if you open up with something super, super, super difficult like racialized trauma in the United States, right? Um, but I can get there. I can get to this notion of talking about racialized trauma in the United States through beauty. There's an invitation to the viewer, an invitation to an audience member to interact with colors and compositions and the use of light and the use of sculpture and the use of all of those things and how they interrupt the way we typically perceive things. So I guess I would say, in essence, I see these modalities as a way to alter perception and to issue an invitation
Mm.
to consider something from somebody else's point of view, right?
Hmm.
So I'll
Hmm.
give you an example from the Biennale. The works there I titled Moments of Beauty Reframed, Create a Blueprint for Thriving If We Just Learn to Pivot. And this piece, Moments of Beauty, was suspended from a palazzo ceiling, intentionally, so that the feeling that a viewer would have in the body is to actually have to pivot backwards to actually see it. And that's, in my mind's eye, the same physical motion that you would partake in if you were considering someone's perspective. I would hope you would pivot a little bit, or like notice in your own body the sense of not only stasis, but also that sense of curiosity, where you're not bracing against someone else's opinion, but you're actually pivoting your body to open yourself to someone else's opinion. And so that was that that use of beauty to address, social concerns, that use of beauty to issue that invitation. Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about that Biennale show, I wanted to participate in it in part because what the curators promised artists is that 500,000 people from around the world view that show every 2 years,
Hmm.
and that they see their work as bridge building between cultures, and that art is facilitating that dialogue. And the organization is called the European Cultural Center in Venice proper, and I was so moved by um, that reality of a show that could attract 500,000 people, that I was really, really, really moved to meet the deadline, which was super short, ship the work internationally, which was really expensive, all those things that were like, should I do this? Should I do
Yeah.
this? Should I do this?
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
the end, you are, walking into the palazzo and sort of sobbing, right? Because you're seeing that, you're one of 100 people chosen globally to be a part of this show that represents essentially like every culture on the face of the earth,
Mhm.
which was very, very, very moving to me. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm. And you're literally looking at the work from not a perspective that you might be used to.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The use
So
of
cool.
all surfaces. It's amazing.
Mm.
In a palazzo, which is just great. That wasn't a 15th century palazzo, which was super good for me because if it had been a 15th century palazzo, we would not have been allowed to hang from the ceiling.
Right,
So it
right,
was
for
a
sure.
17th century palazzo,
It's just old enough,
just old
but
enough,
not too old.
but not too old. Exactly.
In 2023, you were commissioned by the Delta Sky Club, speaking of taking planes in first class. And your work, entitled My Optimism Returning, was featured at the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport. Could you say a little bit about the commission and how you determined what you would create for them?
Yes, absolutely. So I received a beautiful email at the top of that year from the curator, um, Susan is her name. And when I received the email, it was such a feeling of disbelief in the sense that my first reaction was that it was fraudulent, right? That somebody wanted me to send a check for 5,000 or whatever, like whatever, like I'm going to send you a check for 5,000 and you cash it and give me 2,000 back and, all this stuff. But upon investigation, I came to understand that Susan Gibbs is a curator who is in charge of essentially all of the art in all of the airports in the United States that have sky clubs. And so she is tasked with this idea of bridging the local arts community and that particular and specific airport by vetting artists who would then sort of represent the ecosystem of that community. And so for the Delta Sky Club project for Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, um, you had to be either a Minnesota-based artist or a Wisconsin-based artist. And so Suzanne picked 10 artists and then reached out to us to create works with the theme of like water and buoyancy and nature.
Mm,
And every airport that she curates has a theme that she's inviting people to explore. Um, and so the way I approached the commission was to basically move into deeper into a body of work. Um, the series is called My Optimism Returning, that I created over a couple of years upon my return from Italy, and then coming back into the studio post residency, and really being pretty downtrodden about being stateside, right?
mm,
In the sense of that loss of what felt like the loss of curiosity. When I'm an artist abroad, I feel that there are a lot of genuine questions that come to me about my artistry. I come
mhm,
back stateside, and it that feeling of interest and support and curiosity lessens.
mm,
And so I have to sort of buffer that by immediately coming into the studio and creating work. So long story short, My Optimism Returning is like the third iteration of a series of paintings that I've created for a couple of years, returning from Italy. And Susan Gibbs, the curator for Delta, wanted a specific series of paintings in specific dimensions. So in
mm,
order to do that, I actually had to create a very large piece. And then from that large piece, basically hand select and frame out the four sections of that painting that I thought were the most provocative. And then
interesting.
approach the curator with that offering. And luckily, she liked my choices. The timeline was very, very short, very short. I kept thinking it wasn't going to happen. Um, and
It doesn't
luckily,
really matter when the deadline is, we'll just
yeah,
meet it.
deadline. I mean,
It's
it
tomorrow
was like,
afternoon, it's okay.
I think I
Got
got
it.
contacted in March. I think we opened in April. I mean, it was, yeah, but
So
it
that's short.
worked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm proud of it. It's really beautiful
Mm,
to visit. And whenever I
Hmm.
go on a trip, I'll go into the Sky Club and, take a little picture with my work and be like, all
Yeah.
right, I'm on my journey.
Yeah. Is it up there permanently or
It's
is it
permanently.
rotating?
So
Okay.
they purchased it. Um, it's not an exposure deal. It was actually bought and they own it and it's there permanently. And they created some beautiful didactics and cards, and the card itself is consistent. The design is consistent across the United States. So whenever I travel, I grab a card from my fellow artists at other airports, and I
Yeah,
particularly
that's
like
nice.
the cards, the art in LaGuardia. So here's the
Yeah.
didactic. It's really lovely. There it is. It's lovely,
Cool. Yeah. They did a
and
nice job.
they did a very nice job. And then they have these beautiful cards, um, and again, consistent across the United States. So you
Mm,
have this gorgeous um, acknowledgement of, local connectivity, which is
hmm.
at the heart, I think, of that project. It's to sort of humanize um, the geographical area in which someone is flying into. So
Yeah.
it's an amazing national project.
Yeah. Beautiful. I also like the work that's up at LaGuardia's Delta Lounge.
Okay,
I think it's pretty
okay,
cool because
yes,
it's like right there at the bottom of the escalators, if you know what I'm talking about.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
At
Love it.
MSP, we've got three,
Yes,
and I'm usually not flying out of the G gate, but sometimes I do. Or I go to that one because that's the best one. That's where your work is, right?
that's where my work is. Yeah, that's the new one.
Okay.
And they
Yeah.
invested in that retractable roof, and they have like you
I
can
didn't
sit.
see that.
Well, yeah, you got to go towards the back, the bar, the retractable roof, and you
Yeah.
can get like gelato. I mean,
Holy
it's a little
cow.
beyond.
Well,
It's a little
gonna need to
beyond.
do that one next.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have told people that who don't know Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, I'm like, if you have access, make the trip, and if you have time, make the trip to the
Thank
G
you.
concourse. Yeah,
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 that's great.
um, yeah. Uh, Knowing that local, national, and global audiences would pass through that Sky Club to see your work, did you think differently about what you're going to make, and were you thinking about were you imagining who might see your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that um, I'm very conscious of framing the intent of a piece, and I try to do my best to communicate the intent of a piece, um, like sort of in and through the title, right? Um, so with this particular piece, it came from a series, as I mentioned earlier, and that series, the words were the same, but the punctuation was different. So it was sort of two words. So my optimism, comma, returning, right?
Hmm.
So it's like I'm returning, but my optimism is returning. And then for this one, for Delta Sky Club, it's different. It's my optimism slash returning, and it's part of that for me. Just very subtle nod to this notion of context. It's in an airport. We're either returning or we're leaving.
Hmm.
And we're making choices as we do that, right?
Hmm.
About our disposition, about um, everything, the money we're spending, the money we're not spending, the people we talk to, the people we don't talk to. And so, what does optimism and returning have to do with each other, um, in a local context, in a regional context, in a national context, in a global context? And particularly, you think about what is happening, what is transpiring, um, in terms of the federal government under the new president's leadership, this particular administration is, I think, pushing on all of those uh, topics relative to kindness, interaction, mutual dependency, um, economies rising and falling, supporting. individuals, supporting organizations, choosing not to support individuals and organizations. So from the perspective for me as a citizen of the United States and as a person who has papers, as a person who has a lot of privilege in this moment, my heart aches around all of the lost opportunities to connect and to
Mm,
invite people into this ethos of caring, um, which has seemingly and the national like dialogue been like deliberately erased for the sake of the gain of just a few wealthy people. And
mhm,
so, like, it's interesting to me to experience my work that I created before this moment, but that for me resonates politically and emotionally and spiritually and artistically as we're all grappling with how to best be human in this moment,
mhm,
and how best to maintain that level of generosity and openness and open heartedness. Yeah.
mm, hmm. North Point Wellness Center acquired three major works of yours for their permanent collection. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so honored to be at their opening ceremony. They have just an incredible staff. Many are multilingual. When I go there, before I've even taken 4 steps, I have heard 3 languages. It's just a beautiful context for a person like me to have my work represented in the collection. And so they had a wonderful process. They invited a number of artists to submit work. They had an open call for work and had a juried selection. And there's a piece called the Infrastructure of Joy that their team selected. And I was so excited because that was a piece I'd made in Italy in 2022. It they decided to hang it adjacent to the main check-in area, so it's a piece that everyone passes. Um, and then they also acquired a very significant piece to me called "Keep Going Until You Run Out of Paint," and that piece and that title is part of a painting series called the Adjacent to Happiness series. And the Adjacent to Happiness series connects to what I was talking about with the show at the U and the Memorialize the Movement show, around this notion of, you know, these paintings came out of the context of me being a Minneapolis artist in 2022. And we were really in Minneapolis going through it in 2022,
Yeah.
um, for many, many reasons that you know. What occurred to me when I started making these large scale paintings in this series, of which I have now 8 of those large scale paintings. I was just asking the question, like, could I ever be happy again? Like, can I just, given what I know, the war in Ukraine had just started, Minneapolis was on fire, all of these things that we were wrestling with. Pandemic was still very, very much a big, big, big factor in our lives and still is. Can I ever be happy again? And the sort of answer that I got back from the universe is maybe, but you can definitely be adjacent to happiness. And so this painting comes out of that series, and it's a tribute to health. It's a tribute to health and wellness. It's a
Mhm,
tribute to my mom's health and wellness journey post stem cell transplant.
hmm,
And she's now, after 2.5 years, statistically and physically cancer free. Um, and so that painting, that wrestling with my maternal lineage and questions about health and well being, felt so appropriate to be connected to North Point. It was just really, really moving. And so they chose to place that piece in a community room on the second floor that is utilized by medical practitioners as well as community members. Lamaze classes, yoga, blood bank donations, you name it, if it has to do with um, what the community needs and what the practitioners need, it's a space for everyone to go. And the painting is there waiting for them. immediately adjacent to Among Story Cloth, which was also really felt like a
Oh,
an amazing pairing, and I felt really honored for that.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Wow, how
yeah,
cool.
and then the third piece is called Scattered Light, and I created that on the island of Monte Isola, which is um, in the Brescia province, and it's this gorgeous, 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 gorgeous mountain island, essentially in the middle of Lake Iseo. And that painting, Scattered Light, has a lot of island energy in it. So it was just, I think it was also a really nice choice, a really joyful choice, as people are kind of confronting their own wellness and welcoming their own wellness, to have that be there to sort of uplift people's spirits. So yeah,
So cool.
really, really cool.
A little bit later in 2025, you're going to be highlighted as one of the 30 selected artists for the 30th anniversary of Art World. What are you going to create for that celebration?
So thank you for asking about that. It's not quite public yet, and I'm waiting for
I
them to.
think by the time that happens, this
It'll
won't
be
happen
public.
before that happens. Yeah, so don't worry about that.
That's great. I love it. Oh, that's hilarious. I was just asking them the other day, hey, when are you going to let people know? So I'm creating a series of 100 paintings, and I'm about
Amazing. 100. That's a lot.
100. Yes, I mean, let me tell you, it's really interesting. For for past art worlds where I haven't necessarily been like, whatever, honored or called out in any particular way except to participate, right? Uh, I've created these process pieces. So I'll do like 50 process pieces or 60 or 75, but they're very, very quick. Process pieces are like a study of color and composition. They're very, very small, like 8 by 8. And then I frame them
Hmm.
myself and then offer them for, um, really a pittance, like, just like $75. These paintings are going to be the same size, 8 by 8. But the difference is that my approach is completely different. So I'm actually looking at each of them as a whole painting, like a whole universe. So I'm taking a lot more time with each one. They're really whimsical, really colorful. And then I've incorporated text and collage and some other elements so that they're like a lot more sort of multidimensional. And then I'll sign them and frame them, and I won't get them scanned. I won't get them photographed. So when they're gone, they're gone. First come, first serve, and those 100 paintings will be ready for our kickoff in Art World to celebrate 30
Wow, so
years.
cool. One of a kind.
Yes, yes.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Uh, can you tell me more? This is getting back into the kind of broader questions about your work and your practice. Can you tell me more about how you see adjacency as a liberating force?
Yeah, adjacency as a liberating force is it's really, for me, a meditative practice, and it's really a very cool invitation to myself to this place of radical acceptance
Mm,
about the imperfection of, fill in the blank, imperfection of the world, imperfection of the political system, imperfection of um, the city tax structure, imperfection of the garbage collection program, imperfection of the educational system, imperfection of my family, imperfection of myself, whatever. The notion of adjacency allows me to explore the nuances in the feelings that are not happiness, as well as the nuances in the feelings that are akin to happiness. The concept kind of gives me permission to be multifaceted emotionally,
mhm,
which I think I think that as a younger artist, I was much more rigid about and insistent upon this kind of toxic happiness. Like
mhm.
I have to be the person in the room who's like uplifting people. I have to make sure people feel like they belong. I have to be welcoming. I have to be open minded. And it was a lot of shoulds, and it was a lot of
Right.
pressure that I put on myself. And
Mhm.
I feel like what's happening for me now is this, yeah, really what it amounts to is like giving myself permission, giving myself permission to have those complex feelings that
Mm-hmm.
are not always pretty, and that I simply don't owe anyone to be at sort of 100%, you know, happiness at every moment of every day. That is just not
Right.
realistic.
Right. Not
Yeah,
at all. It's impossible.
it's impossible.
And yeah, and in a way that what you described as toxic happiness can be invalidating to your humanity and your feelings of, your the spectrum of feelings, which is what makes us who we are. It's like,
Exactly. Exactly.
how can you fully understand one thing if you don't also have an understanding of the other thing? It's just
Exactly. Exactly.
interesting. We talked about adjacency as a liberating force. So now I want to ask, how do you see art as a liberating force, and how do you see art as freedom?
Yeah. I mean, let's start with art as freedom, right?
Okay. Yeah.
You think about this, there are so many people around me, whether it's neighbors or family members or what have you, who, who don't feel free, who are not free, who feel they can't create the life they want to live. And when I think about myself as an artist, I think about this great studio I used to have way back when I got back to the Twin Cities after my Bush leadership years out at Harvard. And I came back. The economy had fallen out of the sky. It was just 2008 was like a hard time to be looking for a job or what have you. And I
That's
had this
right.
studio, and it was like this. It was above like a place that like detailed cars. So there's all this like poison in the air all the time. Anyway, I
Yeah.
survived. I'm just saying it was like
Yeah.
kind of poisonous. But anyways, I would throw open the doors to the studio and I would like skip across the space to work on this painting called "Let the First Mark Be One of Joy." And in that particular painting, um, part of what I was sort of teaching myself was like every time I enter the studio, just make a mark, because I would kind of freeze and be like, I'm never going to be able to paint again. But then if
Mhm.
I could just go into the studio and make one mark and then let that first mark be one of joy, which became the name of the painting, um, then I could allow myself to remember that I get to create whatever I want, whenever I want.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
is to me the essence of the freedom of the artist's way, the artist's life, is that
Mhm.
you and I are walking all the time with these notions, these ideas that we want to manifest. And we don't spend too much time thinking, do I have the right to manifest that? Do I have the right to create that?
Mhm.
No, you move forward and you try to execute what's in your mind. And that actual ability is not common. It's just not a freedom, I would say, that the majority of the people are walking around feeling that they have the right to execute the thing that's in their mind,
Right.
to explore, to contextualize, to compare, any of those things. No. And so to have that be a yes that is not
Mhm.
resisted, that for me is the ultimate freedom.
Yeah. That's a great way to say it. I love that.
Thank you.
Do you want to try the other one?
Yeah, tell me. Remind me. I went way deep in that.
No, I mean, I think to me, they're related, which is why I kind of asked them together. But how do you see art as a liberating force?
Art as a liberating force. Yeah. Well, in my studio practice, I see art as a liberating force in that, well, art invites me to be grounded in reality, in the creative process, and it invites me to consider time on task, right? So sometimes people will ask me, like, well, so, like, do you just create when you're inspired? And it's like, nope. I have a studio schedule. I've had the same studio schedule for 25 years, right?
Sometimes a schedule can be liberating.
That schedule is very liberating. That schedule is super liberating. Thank you for understanding me. Yeah, but that's just it, right? Art as a liberating force. It's like For me, art is its structure, it's an invitation, a livelihood. Uh, it's an obligation, not in the negative sense of feeling burdened, but I know that if I didn't create, I would not feel as liberated as I do. And I know that I would feel a certain amount of like resentment towards the world, whatever that thing is that people are asking me to do that I don't want to do, and then not embrace the artistry. That's just not an option because I know already that if I ignore that part of me, um, the feeling of non-liberation, right, becomes an oppressive force. And so by embracing the artistry, I embrace the possibility of creation, which then helps liberate my mind, my heart, my soul. And then in the end, I can just be kinder to people
Hmm.
because I'm meeting my own needs of having to express and implement and actualize these thousands of ideas that are in my head, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
That that stands out to me that you just said that you're able to meet your own needs, which I don't know if everybody can say that. That's amazing.
yeah, that's
Congrats.
huge.
That's huge.
That's huge. Asking yourself,
um,
what do you want? And then being able to give it to yourself. Yeah, that's literally my definition of adulting.
yeah, yeah. And not feeling like you don't deserve it and just saying yes to yourself. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know, like my sister and I talk about this a lot, when we think about that our parents were very strict with those of us who, like were coming out female and identifying as female versus my brothers. And part of it is that strictness that they had with us. It's now become part of the liberation because when I think to myself, like, hey, I need a first class ticket to Italy, my first impulse is not to call mom and dad and say, like, hey, I need a first class ticket to Italy. It'd be really great if you would buy that for me. And I'm going to go take my first class. I'm just like, if I need a first class ticket to Italy, I have to provide myself with that first class ticket to Italy, right?
Well, and if you could do that for yourself, that's amazing. It's great. How do you see yourself as a cultural ambassador, and what does it mean to you to be an artist?
Yeah, when I'm outside the United States, I really do my best to yeah, show people that I meet in the context of my art world shenanigans abroad, that um we are really by and large a kind people, and we're very respectful of other cultures, we're very open to other cultures, and just to sort of mirror the kindness and the reciprocity that's shared with me. I really see that as my obligation as an artist to really represent it to the best of my ability. Um, and frankly, I'm like a little afraid of now what that responsibility is going to look like in the face of what is transpiring now. How successful will I be in being able to bridge some of those gaps, bridge those spaces that were formerly bridged but now may be burned? I don't know. Um, but I really do, insofar as I can, make those connections with others from other cultures. I definitely feel like it's a responsibility I take pretty seriously. And
Hmm.
part of it is, of my own upbringing. I am multicultural, multilingual, multiracial, and you know, in my family of origin, I'm like the only one who is all of those things because my parents got divorced. So I'm sort of like the only one who's Congolese American, right? And it's interesting to be kind of exactly who I am in my family of origin system and then to go out into the world with that same perspective of like, being that bridge builder between the two cultures, or being a bridge builder between two language groups, or um, two like diametrically opposed ways of seeing things,
Yeah.
which totally represented my parents. Uh, so it's kind of like a little bit baked in to sort of who I am and how I came to the planet to be a bridge builder.
Hmm. You've talked about this a little bit, about some of the opportunities you've had to travel and participate in artist residencies around the world. How does traveling and creating abroad feed your creative practice?
Traveling and creating abroad is the ultimate creative practice, because the thing that I enjoy so much, and I'm really glad you asked that question, Mary, is I really enjoy preparing for the journey. Like, I really enjoy anticipating what I'll need
Yeah.
and then packing that. And sometimes that's an act of faith, because it's like, okay, wait, why am I buying and packing barbecue skewers? Like, so I found, I went to the kitchen store and I found these like 3 packs of barbecue skewers. And I was like, am I gonna just be like eating a lot of meat? Like, what's happening?
Yeah. Do I need these?
Do I
Maybe.
need these? And it turned out that what I did on that specific residency was I entered into my engineering mind, and I used those barbecue skewers to create sculptures that
Hmm.
then later became the works that we have talked about relative to the McPhail Center, and Layers of Joy show, and even the Biennale itself, right? Like, that was like the seed of the whole thing. And so by just taking a little bit of silk and a little bit of structural material, I could very quickly enter into studio space no matter where I was, but especially in the residency, and build out these dream landscapes, photograph them, draw them, write about them, dream about them, and then come back and implement at a larger scale what I had been ideating around, and constructing. So that's a liberating force while traveling. The other thing that's so fun while traveling for me is, the Italians say dolce far niente, the art and beauty of doing nothing, right? And for Americans, for us, plan and we move, we do all these things. Every 3 days, we're like moving to another country. I'm going to Ireland now. I've already been in England for 3 days, so I gotta go. Gotta go. And people are like, "Where are you going? Like, what are you? Just sit down, have a cup of tea. Like, what are you doing? You don't need to do
Tell
so
me
much.
about your day.
Yeah, just just look around. But traveling for me is really liberating in that exact reason of looking around and trying to and having the experience of refreshing my eyes, right? Just allowing myself to experience the local culture, and allowing myself to then be inspired, and allowing myself to feel the feeling of safety. I've taught myself how to create that feeling of safety. But I wouldn't say that I always feel safe here in the United
Mm,
States or
mm.
in my neighborhood or whatever. So to go abroad and be in, Pinabili, Italy, for example, in the rural countryside outside of Bologna, and that it's dark, and I'm not looking behind my shoulder or worried that someone is after me, is an amazing feeling. So that's super liberating.
Beautiful. If people want to see and hear your work or learn more about you, where is a good place for them to find that information?
If people would like to learn more, definitely I would say 2 places. One would be to start with my website. I have all of my shows sort of cataloged there. Some shows have video components that are linked within my website, um, or related like curatorial articles or what have you. And then the other place is that's kind of more on the active side, is just my Instagram feed. I use it exclusively for my artistry and my art business, and try to share moments of creativity and joy in those posts. So, yeah, those are the 2
Yeah.
places.
Nice. Can you say your website handle and your Instagram handle?
Sure. My website handle is Eyenga Bokamba Paintings, and my Instagram handle is my name at Eyenga Bokamba.
Okay, great. Beautiful. It was so awesome to talk to you. Thank you so much. It's always fun to chat with another friend and
Yes.
learn more about you and get deeper into your practice.
Thank
To the
you.
audience, thank you. Thank you for listening. This has been another edition of the Sanguine Arts Locavart podcast.